The church was suffocating, the air thick with grief and the scent of lilies, when my son's scream shattered everything. "You should have been the one to die, Ma!" Jamal's words, raw and childlike, cut deeper than any knife, leaving me, Angela Carter, a 50-year-old bookkeeper from Atlanta, broken at my husband Marcus's funeral. I'm a woman who's fought to keep my family afloat, pouring everything into my son's battle with bipolar disorder, only to face his rage and a chilling truth about Marcus's death. This is a story of betrayal by my own blood, by a company hiding deadly secrets. It's a journey through pain, guilt, and redemption that you won't believe until you hear it all. Stick with me to the end, and please hit that subscribe button, share where you're watching from and when. Your stories keep me going. The Atlanta sun hung heavy that September morning, its heat soaking through my black dress, making it cling to my skin like a second layer of grief. Inside the First Ebenezer Baptist Church, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and sorrow, the organ's low wail weaving through the murmurs of mourners, packed shoulder to shoulder in the pews. I stood near the altar, my hands trembling, staring at the open casket where Marcus lay. My husband, my anchor, now just a shell, his face too still, too pale, stripped of the life that once lit up our home. I'm Angela Carter, 50 years old, a bookkeeper who spent half her life balancing numbers and the other half trying to balance a family. But nothing in my ledger could have prepared me for the pain that was about to hit. My son, Jamal, stood beside me, his tall frame hunched like a child caught in a storm. At 26, he's a man, but his bipolar disorder makes him swing between rage and fragility, his emotions raw like a kid's. Since he was little, any hint of neglect, me or Marcus not being there, would set him off, his voice high and desperate, his eyes pleading. "Why you always gone, Ma?" he'd cry, curling into himself, whispering, "I'm all alone." That morning, as the preacher droned about eternal rest, I saw it coming. The tightness in Jamal's jaw, the way his fingers dug into his palms. Then, like a dam breaking, he screamed, his voice piercing the church's solemn hush. "You should have been the one to die, Ma." It was a child's tantrum in a man's body, sharp as a blade, slicing through my heart. The congregation froze, their eyes darting between us, pity and shock mingling in their stares. My knees buckled, but I caught myself on the pew, my breath shallow, my world tilting. I've spent years pouring everything into Jamal, every dollar, every sleepless night. As a bookkeeper for a big construction firm, I drowned in spreadsheets. But it was the side gigs, waiting tables, selling clothes online, that paid for his doctors. Marcus, a civil engineer, was always out on some dusty site, building bridges and skyscrapers, leaving me to juggle work and Jamal's endless appointments. The specialists in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, each one promised hope, but drained our bank account. Every visit meant another night I wasn't home, another time Jamal's illness flared, his voice small but furious. "You're never here, Ma. Nobody's here." His bipolar disorder made every absence feel like abandonment, and I'd lie awake, guilt gnawing at me, wondering if I was failing him. Now, standing in that church, his words, "You should have died," felt like the verdict I'd feared all along. I was a shitty mother. The church's stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across the polished wood of Marcus's casket, a cruel beauty against the ugliness of my thoughts. I wanted to reach for Jamal, to pull him close like when he was small, when I could soothe his tantrums with a hug. But his eyes, usually warm like his daddy's, were cold, lost in that childlike rage his illness unleashed. He hugged himself, rocking slightly, muttering, "Ain't nobody here for me." My chest ached, torn between wanting to scream back and wanting to hold him until his pain stopped. I'd spent years fighting for him, every pill, every therapy session, every dollar scraped together. But in that moment, I felt like I'd lost him, lost us. The preacher's voice faded into a hum, his words about heaven meaningless against the hell in my heart. I stood there, my dress sticking to my sweaty back, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. They saw a grieving widow, but I felt like a fraud, a mother whose son wished her dead. I thought of Marcus, how he'd come home late, dust on his boots, and still find time to toss a football with Jamal, even when our boy was screaming, "You don't care about me." I thought of the nights I'd collapsed on the couch, exhausted from 3 jobs, only to hear Jamal sob in his room. I'm by myself. His illness made him feel like an island, and I'd been too busy keeping us afloat to see how far he'd drifted. As the service dragged on, I touched Marcus's cold hand in the casket, whispering, "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't do enough." The guilt was a tidal wave. Guilt for not being there for Jamal, for not saving Marcus, for letting our family fracture. Jamal bolted before the final hymn, his sneakers squeaking on the church floor, leaving me alone in a sea of mourners. I stood by the casket as the crowd thinned, the Atlanta heat pressing through the open doors, carrying the scent of magnolias and car exhaust. I looked at Marcus's face one last time, his features so peaceful they seemed wrong. I'd failed him, failed Jamal, failed myself. But somewhere deep, beneath the pain, a spark flickered, a need to fight, to pull Jamal back from his loneliness, to prove I wasn't the mother he thought I was. I stepped outside, the sun blinding, the city's pulse humming in the distance. Jamal was gone, vanished into the streets, probably curled up somewhere, feeling alone again. My heart screamed to chase him, but my legs wouldn't move. I stood there, clutching my purse, the weight of his words crushing me. "You should have died." I didn't know how to fix this, how to reach a son whose illness made him see me as the enemy. But I swore, right there on the church steps, that I'd try. I'd fight for him, for Marcus's memory, for the family we'd been. Even if it broke me, I'd find a way to show Jamal he wasn't alone, that I was still here, no matter how much his words hurt. The Atlanta skyline glittered through my apartment window, a cruel mockery of the darkness swallowing me whole. It was a month since Marcus's funeral, since Jamal's scream, "You should have been the one to die, Ma," carved a hole in my heart. I'm Angela Carter, 50, a bookkeeper who spent years drowning in numbers and guilt. Work was supposed to be my escape, but the office felt like a graveyard, sterile, cold, the hum of computers echoing Marcus's absence. Whispers around the coffee machine hinted at something rotten. His death, that scaffolding collapse, wasn't just an accident. My gut churned with a need to know, not just for him, but for Jamal, my 26-year-old son, whose bipolar disorder made him feel like the loneliest soul in Georgia. Late one night, after a grueling shift at the diner, my hands still smelling of grease, I sat at our cluttered kitchen table, Marcus's old laptop glowing in the dim light. The apartment was a mess, unpaid bills stacked like tombstones, Jamal's pill bottles scattered like accusations. I dug through his emails, my heart pounding as I found a folder labeled Site Concerns. There they were, messages between Marcus and his boss, tense and clipped. "Cutting safety checks to save costs is reckless," Marcus wrote, his words steady but urgent. The reply was ice cold. "Focus on your job, Carter. Budget's not your problem." My breath caught, rage bubbling up. They'd ignored him, and now he was gone, his life traded for a few bucks. I slammed the laptop shut, the Atlanta night outside humming with traffic, but all I heard was the echo of Jamal's voice, high and childish. "You're never here, Ma." Jamal's bipolar disorder had haunted us since he was a kid. Every absence, mine to work, Marcus's to the work site, sparked tantrums, his voice small but furious. "Why are you always gone? I'm by myself." I dragged him to specialists in New York, Chicago, anywhere with a promise of help, each visit costing thousands, bleeding our savings dry. I'd work double shifts, sling burgers, sell clothes online, anything to pay for his meds, his therapy. But every late night meant another evening he spent alone, curled up in his room, muttering, "Ain't nobody here for me." His illness turned every missed moment into a betrayal, and I'd lie awake, guilt gnawing at my bones, knowing I was failing him. Now, staring at those emails, I felt that same guilt twist into anger, not just at the company, but at myself for letting Jamal's loneliness grow. I tried reaching out to him, knocking on his bedroom door, the paint chipped from years of his angry fists. "Jamal, baby, can we talk?" I called, my voice soft, desperate. The door stayed shut, music blaring inside, but I heard his voice, small and broken. "Don't act like you care now, Ma." It was like talking to a child, his bipolar disorder stripping away the man he was, leaving only hurt and rage. I slid down the wall, my face in my hands, the apartment's stale air heavy with regret. I saw his face at the funeral, eyes red, hugging himself like a scared kid, whispering, "I'm all alone." I wanted to break through that door, hold him until he believed I was there, but his illness built walls I couldn't climb. The next day at work, I cornered Tyrone, a coworker who'd known Marcus since their college days. We stood in the parking lot, the Atlanta heat shimmering off the asphalt, the distant roar of construction sites a bitter reminder. "Tell me what you know," I said, my voice low, trembling. Tyrone's eyes darted nervously, but he leaned in. "Marcus warned them, Angela. That scaffolding was a death trap. They didn't listen. Too busy saving money." My heart raced, pride for Marcus's courage mixing with a sickening fury. He'd fought for his crew, for safety, and they'd let him die. I thanked Tyrone, my hands shaking as I walked back to my car, the city's skyline looming like a judge. That night, I sat on our sagging couch, the laptop's glow casting shadows across the room. The emails were proof Marcus had been a hero, and the company had betrayed him. But the fight wasn't just for him. It was for Jamal, to show him I could be the mother he needed, not the one he cursed at his father's funeral. I thought of his tantrums as a boy, sobbing in hospital waiting rooms. "Ma, don't leave me alone." I'd worked my ass off to save him, but every dollar earned meant another moment he felt abandoned. Now, with Marcus gone, I couldn't let the company get away with it. I had to fight for justice, for truth, for the son who thought I didn't care. The Atlanta streets buzzed outside, alive with lights and noise, but inside, I was drowning in memories. Jamal's door stayed closed, his music a barrier between us. I whispered to the empty room, "I'm going to make this right, baby." The spark of determination flickered brighter, a promise to Marcus's memory and to Jamal, who deserved a mother who wouldn't give up, no matter how alone he felt. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I couldn't stop. Not now, not ever. I stood in the boardroom, the air heavy with the smell of polished wood and arrogance, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm Angela Carter, 50, a bookkeeper who spent years balancing numbers and guilt, but nothing prepared me for this moment. Facing the CEO, a man whose tailored suit couldn't hide his cold eyes, I demanded answers about Marcus's death. "You ignored his warnings about that scaffolding," I said, my voice trembling but firm, the emails I'd found burning in my memory. He leaned back, his smirk slicing through me. "Keep pushing, Ms. Carter, and you'll be out of a job by Monday." Then he dropped a bombshell that froze my blood. Marcus wasn't the first. The company had buried other deaths, workers crushed under steel, burned in explosions, erased from existence, with hush money and threats to silence their families. My rage surged, a fire in my chest, but so did a gnawing fear. What kind of monster was I up against? Back home, my hands shook as I opened Marcus's laptop, the screen's glow casting harsh light across my face. I was desperate for more proof, something to make sense of the betrayal I'd uncovered. I found a video buried in a folder labeled Personal, and my breath caught as Marcus's face appeared, worn but resolute, his voice low and urgent. "Angela, if anything happens to me, be strong. Keep Jamal safe. He needs to be a good man." He spoke of the worksite dangers, faulty equipment, ignored inspections, lives traded for profit. My throat tightened, tears blurring his image. I remembered the years of dragging Jamal to doctors, from New York's sterile clinics to Chicago's crowded hospitals, each visit costing thousands, draining our savings. I'd work 3 jobs, bookkeeping by day, waitressing by night, selling clothes online till dawn, trying to keep him alive. But every late shift meant another night he spent alone, his bipolar disorder flaring, his voice small and broken. "Ma, don't leave me alone. I'm scared." His illness made every absence a wound, and I'd fed that loneliness, thinking I was saving him. When Jamal caught me watching the video, he exploded, his face twisting into that childlike rage his illness unleashed. "You're always digging into Dad's stuff, but you were never there for us," he screamed, his voice high, like a kid throwing a tantrum, his eyes red with tears and that deep, aching loneliness. "You never cared when I needed you." My heart shattered, his words echoing the funeral. "You should have died." I wanted to scream back, tell him about the nights I cried myself to sleep, exhausted from work, guilt eating me alive for leaving him alone. But I saw the scared boy in him, not the man, his bipolar stripping away reason, leaving only pain. "Jamal, I'm trying," I whispered, my voice cracking, my hands reaching for him. He turned away, hugging himself, muttering, "Ain't nobody here for me." It was like a knife twisting in my gut, his loneliness a mirror of my own failure. I couldn't let it go. Not Marcus's death, not the company's lies. I started calling families of other victims, my fingers trembling as I dialed numbers from records Tyrone had slipped me. A widow from Decatur answered, her voice flat, hollow. "They gave us 10 grand to shut up," she said. "Signed a paper and that was it." A father from Macon told the same story. Money, threats, silence. My stomach churned with disgust, my hands clenching into fists. The company hadn't just betrayed Marcus. They'd built a machine to erase men like him, trading lives for profit. I sat at my kitchen table, the laptop's glow my only company, feeling like I was drowning in their corruption. Marcus had fought for those workers, warning them about the dangers, and they'd let him die. I'd fought for Jamal, pouring everything into his treatment, and he still saw me as the enemy. His loneliness, a wall I couldn't climb. The guilt was a weight I couldn't shake, heavier than the bills piling up or the exhaustion from years of hustle. I thought of Jamal at 10, sobbing in a Chicago hospital waiting room, his small hands clutching my sleeve. "Ma, don't go. I'm all by myself." I'd been at work, always at work, trying to keep us afloat. Every missed moment fed his illness, his loneliness growing like a shadow. Now, at 26, he was still that scared boy, his tantrums raw and desperate, his voice whispering, "Nobody's here." I wanted to hold him, tell him I was here, but his rage shut me out. And yet Marcus's video was a call to arms, his words echoing in my soul, "Be strong." I wasn't just fighting for him. I was fighting to show Jamal I could be the mother he needed, not the one he cursed. I closed the laptop, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and resolve, my heart pounding like a drum. The company's secrets were a poison, seeping into every part of my life. But so was my guilt. I'd spent years thinking I was saving Jamal, but I'd left him alone in his darkness. Marcus's plea to be strong was a lifeline, pulling me from despair. I whispered to the empty room, "I'll make this right, for both of you." The fight was bigger than me now, not just against the company's lies, but against the loneliness consuming my son. I didn't know how to win, but I knew I couldn't stop, not when Jamal needed me, even if his illness made him believe he was alone. The lawyer's office smelled of old leather and coffee, a faint comfort against the storm raging inside me. I'm Angela Carter, 50, a bookkeeper who spent weeks staring down the truth about my husband Marcus's death. A truth the construction company buried under lies and blood money. I'd hired Denise, a lawyer with a sharp tongue and sharper eyes, to sue them for negligence, not just for Marcus, but for all the workers they'd erased with payoffs. The fight was on, but every step forward felt like wading through mud, and Jamal, my 26-year-old son, was slipping further away, his bipolar disorder turning every attempt to reach him into a battle. His scream at Marcus's funeral, "You should have been the one to die, Ma," still echoed in my head, a wound that wouldn't heal. At work, the air was thick with betrayal. The company spread lies that Marcus was careless, that the scaffolding collapse was his fault. Co-workers who'd once shared lunch with me now avoided my eyes, their whispers cutting like glass. I sat at my desk, fingers trembling over my keyboard, feeling like a ghost in my own life. I'd poured everything into this fight, savings, energy, hope, but the cost was more than money. It was Jamal. His illness made him fragile, his mood swinging from rage to despair, always worse when he felt alone, and he felt alone all the time. "Ain't nobody here for me," he'd mutter, his voice small like a kid lost in the dark. I'd tried to be there, but years of working 3 jobs, bookkeeping, waitressing, selling clothes online to pay for his doctors had left him feeling abandoned. Every specialist visit from Atlanta to Chicago cost thousands, and every dollar I earned meant another night he spent crying, "Ma, why you always gone?" I found a lifeline at a community center in Atlanta's West End, a place where Black folks like me gathered to share their pain. The room was warm, filled with the hum of voices and the clink of coffee mugs. I stood up, my voice shaking, and spilled my heart. Jamal's bipolar disorder, his loneliness, the way his tantrums made him sound like a child, screaming, "You never cared." I told them about the funeral, his words slicing through me, and the company's lies about Marcus. A woman named Ruth, her eyes kind but weary, gripped my hand. "Don't let his words define you, Angela," she said. "He's hurting, but you're more than his pain." Her words were a balm, but they couldn't erase the guilt. I'd spent years thinking I was saving Jamal, but his illness made every absence a betrayal, and now he was drowning in it. Jamal was spiraling. He'd quit his job at the auto shop, started hanging with a rough crowd, and came home reeking of weed and liquor. One night, I found him in his room, eyes glassy, a bottle of pills I didn't recognize on his dresser. "What are these, Jamal?" I asked, my voice tight with fear. He snapped, his voice high and childish. "You don't get to care now, Ma. You were never here." He threw a shoe against the wall, his hands shaking, then curled up on his bed, whispering, "I'm all by myself." My heart broke, seeing the scared boy in him, his bipolar stripping away the man he was. I wanted to hold him, tell him I was here, but his rage was a wall, and I didn't know how to climb it. I tracked down Dr. Ellis, Jamal's old therapist, hoping for answers. Her office was small, cluttered with books and framed degrees, a faint smell of lavender in the air. "His bipolar makes him hypersensitive to abandonment," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "When you or Marcus weren't there, it wasn't just absence, it was proof to him that he's alone." I nodded, tears burning my eyes, remembering his tantrums as a kid. "Ma, don't leave me." I'd thought paying for his treatment, thousands spent on clinics in New York, Chicago, was enough, but it wasn't. Every late shift, every missed dinner, had fed his loneliness, his illness turning it into rage. "He needs you to show up, Angela," Dr. Ellis said, "not just with money, but with time." The legal fight took a turn when I got a call from a woman named Carla, the sister of a worker killed on another site. Her voice was low, cautious, as she shared documents, a paper trail of bribes, non-disclosure agreements, proof the company had paid off families and even local officials to bury the truth. They gave us 20 grand to stay quiet, she said, her words heavy with shame. I took it for my kids. My stomach twisted, rage and disgust mixing with a sickening clarity. The company wasn't just negligent. It was a machine, chewing up lives and spitting out silence. Marcus had fought against that machine, and it had killed him. I clutched Carla's documents, my hands trembling, feeling the weight of his courage and my failure to match it. I sat alone that night, the hum of the refrigerator my only company, Carla's papers spread across the table. The fight was bigger than I'd imagined, but so was the cost. Jamal's door stayed closed, his music blaring, a barrier between us. I thought of his face at the funeral, red with tears, hugging himself like a lost child. I'm all by myself, he'd whispered. I'd spent years thinking I was fighting for him, but I'd left him alone in his darkness. Now I was fighting for Marcus, for justice, but also for Jamal, to prove I could be the mother he needed, not the one he cursed. I whispered into the quiet, I'm not giving up, baby. The company's lies, Jamal's pain, my guilt, they were heavy, but I'd carry them all if it meant pulling him back from that lonely edge. The smell of cheap whiskey hit me like a punch as Jamal stumbled through the door, his eyes wild, his face twisted in that childlike rage, his bipolar disorder unleashed. It was a muggy Atlanta night, the kind that made you feel trapped in your own skin. I'm Angela Carter, 50, a bookkeeper who's been fighting a war on two fronts, against the construction company that killed my husband, Marcus, and for my son, Jamal, whose illness makes him feel like the loneliest soul alive. His scream at Marcus's funeral, "You should have been the one to die, Ma!" still burned in my chest, but tonight it came again, raw and high-pitched, like a kid throwing a tantrum. "You should have died instead of Dad," he bellowed, then collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, hugging himself tight. "I'm always alone, Ma." His words gutted me, but I refused to let them break me. I dropped to the floor beside him, my own tears falling, my heart a tangled mess of pain and love. I'd been fighting for weeks, armed with Carla's documents and Denise's legal know-how, to expose the company's lies, bribes to silence families, cover-ups of workers' deaths, Marcus among them. But every step in that fight pulled me further from Jamal, whose bipolar disorder made him hypersensitive to my absence. I called Dr. Ellis the next morning, my voice cracking as I recounted the scene. Jamal's rage, his tears, the way he curled up like a scared child. Her office was a quiet haven, the soft tick of a clock grounding me as she spoke. His bipolar disorder amplifies his sense of abandonment, she said, her eyes kind but unflinching. When you or Marcus weren't there, it wasn't just absence. It was proof to him that he's alone in the world. My throat tightened, memories flooding back of Jamal at 10, clutching my hand in a Chicago hospital waiting room, his voice small. "Ma, don't leave me, I'm all by myself." I'd thought paying for his treatment, thousands spent on specialists in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, was enough, but it wasn't. Every late shift, every missed bedtime had fed his loneliness, his illness turning it into rage. I sat across from him that evening, the living room dim, the hum of a distant fan the only sound. "Jamal, baby, I messed up," I said, my hands shaking, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I wasn't there enough, but I was trying to keep you alive." His face softened, his eyes red and wet, and for the first time, he didn't lash out. He cried, his voice small like a child's. "I don't want to hate you, Ma, but I always feel alone." It was a knife to my heart, but also a crack of light. His bipolar disorder made him feel like an island, but he was letting me in, just a little. I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away, his fingers trembling in mine. "I'm here now," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm not going anywhere." He nodded, his sobs quieting, and agreed to try family therapy at the community center. A small step, but the first real hope I'd felt in months. The weight of his words at the funeral, His loneliness and the company's betrayal pressed down on me. But that moment, his hand in mine, his tears drying, was a turning point. I'd been fighting for Marcus's truth, but this was about Jamal's. I thought of the years I'd dragged him to doctors, the bills that kept me up at night, the jobs that stole me from him. I'd worked my ass off thinking I was saving him, but I'd left him alone in his darkness. Now, I saw the scared boy in him, not just the angry man, and I vowed to bridge that gap. The legal fight was still on, the company's lies still loomed, but this was bigger. I was fighting to show Jamal he wasn't alone, no matter how loud his illness screamed otherwise. I lay awake that night, the ceiling fan casting shadows across the room, my mind replaying our conversation. Jamal's voice, small and broken, echoed, "I always feel alone." I thought of Marcus, his video urging me to be strong, to keep Jamal safe. I'd failed them both for so long, but this was my chance to make it right. The community center's therapy sessions were a lifeline, a way to rebuild what I'd let crumble. I didn't know if I could pull Jamal back from his loneliness, but I knew I had to try. His pain, his rage, his illness, they weren't the whole of him. Beneath it all was my boy, the one who used to draw pictures for me, who laughed with Marcus in the backyard. I clung to that image, a flicker of hope in the dark, and whispered to the quiet, "I'm gonna fight for you, baby. I swear." The community center's meeting room was a sanctuary, its walls lined with faded posters and the faint smell of pine cleaner grounding me. I'm Angela Carter, 50, a bookkeeper who's been fighting to hold my world together since my husband Marcus's death and my son Jamal's scream at his funeral. "You should have been the one to die, Ma." That night when Jamal broke down, sobbing like a child, I'm always alone. We'd found a crack of light, his agreement to try family therapy. Now, sitting across from him in that room, his hands fidgeting like a kid's, I felt a fragile hope. Jamal, 26, his bipolar disorder making him swing between rage and fragility, was starting to let me in, and I clung to that like a lifeline. Our first therapy session was raw, like peeling back a wound. Jamal's voice was low, hesitant, his eyes fixed on the floor. "I'd scream because I thought nobody cared," he said, his tone soft but heavy, like I was the only one in the world. My throat tightened, guilt flooding me as I remembered the years I'd left him alone, chasing money for his treatment. Specialists in New York, Chicago, Atlanta. Each one costs thousands, forcing me to work 3 jobs, bookkeeping, waitressing, and selling clothes online. Every late shift meant another night Jamal spent crying, his voice small and broken. "Ma, why are you always gone? I'm by myself." His bipolar disorder turned every absence into a betrayal, and I'd fed that loneliness, thinking I was saving him. Now, hearing him speak, I saw the scared boy beneath the man, his illness making him feel like an island. "I'm here now, baby," I said, my voice cracking, reaching for his hand. He didn't pull away, and that small gesture felt like a victory. The legal fight against the construction company was gaining ground. A coworker, James, had come forward, his testimony exposing their cover-ups. Shoddy equipment, ignored warnings, families paid off to stay silent. The company settled, offering a hefty sum that felt like blood money. I didn't want their cash. I wanted justice for Marcus, for the workers they'd erased. But the money was a tool, and I poured it into a scholarship fund named after Marcus, for kids of construction workers to chase dreams he'd never see. When I told Jamal, his eyes lit up, a spark I hadn't seen since he was a kid drawing pictures for me. "I want to help, Ma," he said, his voice softer, less childish. He started painting, bold, vibrant canvases filled with swirling colors, like his emotions spilled onto the page. He sold them to raise money for the fund, a way to honor his dad. "I don't want to be alone forever," he told me one night, his voice small but hopeful, and my heart ached with pride and pain. I was learning to forgive myself. though the memories still stung. I thought of the nights I'd collapsed, exhausted from work, hearing Jamal sob in his room. Ain't nobody here for me. I'd thought paying for his treatment was enough, but it wasn't. His bipolar disorder made him feel like the world had abandoned him, and I'd been part of that. Therapy was helping him name that loneliness, teaching him to control his tantrums. He still had bad days, moments when he'd snap, his voice high and childish. You don't care. But they were fewer, his rage softer, his eyes less lost. I clung to those moments like when he'd sit with me after a session, sketching quietly, his hands steady for once. "I'm trying, Ma," he'd say, and I'd nod, tears burning my eyes, knowing he was fighting as hard as I was. The scholarship fund's launch was a whirlwind of emotion. The community center was packed, the air buzzing with voices and the clink of glasses. Jamal stood at the podium, his broad shoulders hunched, his voice trembling but clear. "My dad fought for what was right," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "And my mom, she fought for me, even when I pushed her away." He paused, swallowing hard, and I saw the boy who used to hug me tight, not the man whose illness made him scream. I've got bipolar, and it makes me feel alone sometimes, but I'm not, 'cause she's here. Tears rolled down my face as the crowd applauded, my heart swelling with pride. He hugged me, his arms tight like a child's, and I felt the weight of years, his loneliness, my guilt, our grief, lift just a little. We were a team now, battered but unbroken, facing his illness and our pain together. I lay awake that night, the hum of the city outside a distant comfort, my mind replaying Jamal's words. "She's here." I thought of Marcus, his video urging me to be strong, to keep Jamal safe. I'd failed them both for so long, but this was our chance to heal. The legal fight had given us a win, but this, Jamal's trust, his small steps toward stability, was the real victory. I didn't know if we'd ever be whole, but we were fighting together. I whispered into the dark, "We're gonna make it, baby." The road was still long, his illness still a shadow, but for the first time I believed we could face it, side by side, no matter how alone he'd felt before. I'm sitting in the warm glow of my cafe, the hum of conversation and the clatter of coffee cups wrapping around me like a hug. I'm Angela Carter, 50, a woman who's been through hell and back, carrying the weight of my husband Marcus's death and my son, Jamal's, scream at his funeral. "You should have been the one to die, Ma." That moment shattered me. But tonight, as I watched Jamal teach a group of kids to paint, his laughter cutting through the air, I feel something new. Pride, hope, a sense of victory. The Marcus Carter Scholarship Fund launch, where Jamal called me the strongest woman I know, was a turning point, a beacon in the darkness of our grief and his bipolar disorder. We're not whole, but we're healing, and that's enough for now. I walked away from the construction company, their lies and blood money too heavy to bear. The settlement from the lawsuit, proof of their cover-ups, bribes to silence families, Marcus's death among them, felt dirty, but I turned it into something clean. I opened this cafe in Atlanta's West End, a cozy space with mismatched tables and walls covered in local art, a hub for the community. Jamal's here most days, running art classes for kids, his hands steady as he guides their brushes, his canvases bright with the colors of his soul. His bipolar still flares. Days when he snaps, his voice high and childish. "You don't care, Ma," or when he curls up whispering, "I'm all alone." But those moments are fewer, softened by therapy and the purpose he's found in art. He's planning college, wants to be an engineer like his dad, and I see Marcus's fire in his eyes, tempered by a resilience I never knew he had. The pain of Jamal's words at the funeral, the sting of his loneliness still lingers like a bruise. I think of the years I spent fighting for him, dragging him to doctors in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, each visit costing thousands, forcing me to work 3 jobs, bookkeeping, waitressing, selling clothes online. Every late shift meant another night he spent crying, his voice small. "Ma, why are you always gone? I'm by myself." His bipolar disorder turned every absence into a betrayal, and I'd lie awake, guilt tearing at me, knowing I'd fed his loneliness. Now, watching him laugh with those kids, his face free of that childlike rage, I feel a weight lift. He's not alone anymore, and neither am I. We're a team, battered but unbroken, facing his illness and our grief together. The cafe is more than a business. It's a sanctuary. Kids from the neighborhood pile in after school, their chatter filling the air as Jamal shows them how to mix colors, his voice patient, his smile genuine. I think of Marcus, how he'd toss a football with Jamal in the backyard, even when our boy screamed, "You don't care about me." I think of the nights I collapsed, exhausted, hearing Jamal sob, "Ain't nobody here for me?" I'd thought paying for his treatment was enough, but it wasn't. His illness made him feel like an island, and I'd been too busy to see how far he'd drifted. Now he's found a purpose, a way to connect, and I've found the courage to be the mother he needs, not perfect, but present. Some days are still hard. Jamal's bipolar disorder doesn't vanish. It's a shadow that lingers. He'll have moments when he shuts down, muttering, "I'm alone," his voice small, like a kid lost in the dark. I worry, my heart tightening. But I've learned to sit with him, to listen, to let him know I'm here. Therapy has taught us both to name his loneliness, to face it together. He's learning to control his tantrums, to channel his pain into art, and I'm learning to forgive myself for the years I wasn't there. Marcus's video, his plea to be strong, echoes in my mind, a reminder that this fight, our fight, is worth it. As I watch Jamal with those kids, his hands steady, his laughter bright, I think back to the scholarship fund launch. He stood at that podium, his voice trembling but clear, talking about his dad, his illness, and me. "My mom fought for me, even when I pushed her away," he said, his eyes meeting mine, no longer lost in rage or loneliness. That moment healed something in me, a wound I thought would never close. The company's betrayal, their bribes, their lies, they tried to bury Marcus. But we brought his truth to light. Jamal's pain, his illness, his words, they tried to break me, but they didn't. I've found my worth, not in perfection or money, but in the love I give, the battles I've fought, and the sun I've pulled back from the edge. I step behind the counter, pouring coffee for a regular, the warmth of the mug grounding me. Jamal glances over, his smile a mirror of Marcus's, and I feel a surge of pride so intense it aches. To anyone out there hurting, listen. When someone you love wounds you, when their pain makes them lash out, when the world screws you over, don't let it define you. Jamal's illness, his loneliness, his scream at the funeral, they cut deep, but they don't own me. Strength is getting up, forgiving and loving through the pain. It's messy, it's hard as hell, but it's worth it. Keep fighting because you're enough, just as you are. If you've made it this far, thank you from the bottom of my heart for walking this painful, messy journey with me. Sharing Jamal's story, Marcus's loss, and my fight isn't easy, but I hope it touched you, maybe even gave you a spark to keep going through your own struggles. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of this hit you hardest? Have you faced betrayal or fought for someone you love even when it hurt? Drop a comment below, share your story, because we're all in this together. Your words mean the world to me, and I'm grateful to every one of you who listened. Until next time, keep fighting, keep loving, and I'll see you soon.